Welcome to Conversations with Poets. I'm Michael Klam, Associate Publisher of the San Diego Poetry Annual. We are once again here at lovely Point Loma Nazarene University, and I got to give a shout out to the Department of Communications, Nathan Gibbs, and especially Point TV. Thank you all for all the support and all the tech. We have Katie Manning here, also from the Department of Writing, Journalism, Languages,
Literature,
Poetry, Literature.
Writing,
The students get a taste of everything in the Department of Literature here at Point Loma Nazarene University. And special guest Jason Magabo Perez, who has been our Poet Laureate for the last 2 years. He's our second Poet Laureate here in San Diego. And we have to give a shout out to the city of San Diego for creating the Post, making it possible. Ron Salisbury was our first, and Jason has done a fantastic job for the second round. So shout out to the city for making this possible, and also for the support of Conversations with Poets. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
So Jason, you're coming up to the end of your Poet Laureateship, but your journey here in San Diego started a long, long time ago. I met you when you were a student at UCSD, and is it true that you were a C+, high-end of below-average student who is now Poet Laureate?
Actually, maybe even more. I don't know if this is impressive, but I was around the B-, C+ English student in particular. So I think, yeah, that's very true. I was not too great of an English student or a writer by those standards, I guess.
Yeah. Well, what got you there? And for all the students here at Point Loma Nazarene University who might be struggling, what got you into literature and into where you are now, really?
I think you know, I had a few great mentors who sort of encouraged me to read widely and to not simply sort of read what was given to me, and instead sort of seek out my own literature, to sort of understand that there were different forms of literature all around me, and the music that I listened to, and other sorts of cultural productions that I was surrounded with. And so I think by engaging a little bit more broadly with some of like different ways that folks use literary arts or language, I think it sort of allowed me to give myself permission to feel a little bit more affirmed, to feel confident to tell my story or to express myself through this, you know, really fraught thing called the English language. Yeah.
You're both teachers. Katie brought you in. I thought it'd be a great idea to have you here as a rep for the department, but also because you're both teachers, you have a lot in common. Did you have a question for Jason as well?
I do. So to set up my question, as you know, you were our guest poet last year for Poetry Day, did a wonderful afternoon workshop. As Michael said, you teach at a university as well. You've done other events at universities. So I'm wondering, what do you think is the role of universities in the San Diego poetry community? And maybe, what could the role be?
Yeah. So I think that, well, I have to answer first. I mean, I teach at Cal State San Marcos for the Ethnic Studies program, and so I think one of the big tasks of Ethnic Studies has always sort of been to make the university relevant to the community, rather than vice versa, making the community relevant to the university, right? And so I think the university has a lot of resources, a lot of intellectual resources, certainly. Some, I think most administrators would say this is not true, but I think there are resources to support work that we do, yes, for the students, but also support work that students might be able to do in the greater community, right? And so, for instance, one of the things that I did in the spring, while it's still in my role, of course, as a Poet Laureate, is I turned one of my ethnic studies courses into a practicum and called it Poetry, Poetics, and Performance in Action. And sort of what they did was they they were campus-based events. I think if ideally I would have loved them to be based in the community, but they were campus-based literary events that the students organized, right? So the students got to learn about programming, budgeting, resources, space rental, all those different things, and also got to study the work of a living writer and to be able to engage them. So I do think that not all of our communities or even family members have the privilege of being at the university or at the college. But I think through poetry, which I always sort of came to and believe as a sort of people's art, we can maybe break down that boundary, right, between university and broader community through literary programming, through creative writing workshops and things like that. And I think I imagine we share this sort of sentiment. I think all of us who have a link to the university, a college, or a school, those of us who are educators and we teach creative writing to our students, I think that we have a responsibility to bring that outside of the university. And that's not just not leaving the students behind and encouraging the students too to become teachers, right? To become folks who organize a community and bring spaces for literature.
Yeah, I love the way you said that, and I love the way that you're doing that with your students and having them plan things. That's wonderful for them and also for the community.
Yeah, to get it out their way, and part of your signature project is just that, right?
Right.
And that even includes things like pop-up open mics,
Correct.
right?
Yeah.
How is that project going, and is there a long-term plan? Is there a 100-year plan for some of the work that you've done?
So it's the San Diego Poetry Futures Project. I put it. I think I branded it as DPF 2024, so that I could be done in December. But part of the goal is to do a series of different kinds of programs, like the programs that my students did when they organized readings, author readings, and engagements with students, to do workshops and do other kinds of events. Today came from City Hall, doing some poetry with some fellow local poets in the plaza to a small audience, but also a lot of just public passersby. I think that the goal is not necessarily to map out a very specific future for poetry and public engagement in San Diego, but instead to experiment with different kinds of programming and then see what sticks, see if that moves us forward as a poetry community, but also as a broader community in San Diego. So I'm interested in pursuing further the project, maybe not in name, but definitely in effort. I think it's helped me build relationships with people, meet new people, and experiment and try out different kinds of poetry programming and projects with partners who may not have had poetry in their space, right?
And you specifically described it as collectively envisioning, mobilizing, and sustaining collaboration in poetry. So you brought people together during your tenure. And how will that continue, like those relationships? Are you going to be working directly with the next poet laureate?
I would like to, if they. I don't want to hover over them. I'll play a backstage role. Definitely happy to continue continue seeing, helping the program grow. Right. I think I'm the second one. Ron Salisbury did a wonderful job
During COVID.
During COVID,
Impossible situation.
right? Just an impossible situation, and I think.
And he still put together some great projects.
He did. He put together some really incredible projects, was really committed to engaging the community in the way that he could, in a safe way. And I think we'll just continue to build off of that. And so I think the city is learning, the libraries are learning, our community is learning about what the position can be and what we can do. And I'm always happy to, if anything, just be an ear for the next poet laureate.
Yeah, there you go. You heard it here. It might be a good idea to know what Jason did this time around, and in your interview, carry on with some of the projects that are working to bring community together. Now, one of the things that's important, I think, for all poets and for teachers as well, is to get those students to help them find mentors, right? To help them find inspiration. You can find inspiration going out to a poetry reading, but you can find inspiration in the books, and you can find inspiration in just exposure to names, right? And you guys, the two of you, you've had mentors over the years. Who would you say is one of the people who's inspired you the most and in part got you here?
Oh, there's so many, so many. I think lately I'm really going back to the work of June Jordan, and for various reasons. I think it's not an interesting, I think maybe a painful way to sort of re-arrive to the work of June Jordan, but I sort of was a big June Jordan fan as I sort of learned more and more about her teaching practice and her political practice, her practice as an activist who would run workshops in New York City, publish anthologies, numerous anthologies, and then she started the Poetry for the People program up at UC Berkeley, where she ultimately, that program, I think it's still, I don't know how active it is now, I think it's still around though. They would train students to teach poetry in the community, and then and students would also learn how to write their own poetry. And so I think that model has been incredibly important for me for the last 2 decades in my practice. But I think coming back to her work and sort of thinking about the clarity of her work and the principled commitment of her work has been just really inspiring to make sense of a particularly rough time.
Yeah. Would you like to read a June?
Sure.
A June Jordan poem?
Yeah.
I have a.
Can I?
Intifada incantation.
Yeah.
Front and back there.
So,
would you like to see it, Katie?
Yeah, thank you.
June Jordan, indispensable American poet, black feminist poet, really left this archive for us, this record of how to exercise solidarity, right? And so she really sort of was pushing, and this is really important for us right now as this sort of genocide, I will call it a genocide that is happening in Gaza, and the atrocities that are happening in surrounding areas. She had really pushed folks, to her peers especially, to be in solidarity with Palestinian people and the struggle, their struggle for liberation and self-determination. And I think June Jordan was fearless in that regard, and I just wanted to share one of her poems because I think like the commitment is undeniable. And also in the poem, it's called Intifada Incantation, poem number 8 for BBL. It feels like a love poem, but it's much more powerful because of her attention to the broader context, right? So I think it's particularly instructive for us these days, especially. Intifada Incantation by June Jordan. I said I loved you, and I wanted genocide to stop. I said I loved you, and I wanted affirmative action and reaction. I said I loved you, and I wanted music out the windows. I said I loved you, and I wanted nobody thirst and nobody cold. I said I loved you, and I wanted justice under my nose. I said I loved you, and I wanted boundaries to disappear. I wanted nobody roll back the trees. I wanted nobody take away daybreak. I wanted nobody freeze all the people on their knees. I wanted you. I wanted your kiss on the skin of my soul. And now you say you love me, and I stand despite the trillion treacheries of sand. You say you love me, and I hold the longing of the winter in my hand. You say you love me, and I commit to friction and the undertaking of the pearl. You say you love me. You say you love me, and I begin to believe maybe you do. I am tasting myself in the mouth of the sun.
This poem is all in uppercase letters.
Yeah.
And I got to give it to Poetry Foundation for publishing it in font size 16,
Yeah.
right? This is June speaking up. Reggie Gaines for a while. His name was always lowercase, but his poems and his text messages to you were always uppercase. You know, he was speaking his mind.
Right.
And I suppose if you read this or taught this, you would have your students almost like, you know, dig into it, like speak it like June might have spoken it, right? And anybody else? How about local poets? You too, Katie. What do you think? Local poets who are an inspiration people should get to know.
Katie.
Katie, for sure.
Thanks.
I've worked with a number of writers. I don't want to forget anyone
Right.
and name them, but I do want to talk about, just mention this poet who I hope, I want to try to bring him back out here. He moved away from San Diego, but he's from Southeast San Diego. He's one of the part of the Taco Shop poets, Benny Heron.
Yeah.
And I remember as a 19, 20-year-old poet, not knowing what I was doing, seeing Benny at Claire de Lune's and all over, sort of doing his thing, and it was incredibly inspiring. I think on the performance and for sure, but he's a poet's poet for sure, and I think you know, his work has been. I continue to go back to sort of memories of seeing him perform.
We keep him here. We've got him here all the
Yeah,
time. He's in the San
yeah,
Diego
good,
Poetry
good,
Annual
good,
every year.
good, good.
And when it was formatted, and when I get the final
Yeah.
to go through and make sure everything's in place. Try not to let anything fall out. My little poem that I put in is on the last page of his. Like, they placed it. And I was so honored, you know, so honored to be on the same space with Benny.
Yeah.
You're putting together a section for a poet laureate section, which is one of the things. And again, thank you for all the support. And you're going to choose some poets to put into your section. And last year it was Jim Moreno, right? It was Joe Maloche, am I right? And these were all poets who had written about struggle in the Middle East. Am I right about that?
Yeah, it was in particular, it was a response to a longer poem that the late great Steve Cowett wrote called Intifada, which was a poem that's an expansive poem, both about in deep reference to Jewish history, but also in his sort of solidarity with the Palestinian people. And so I sort of just gathered some folks who were trying to make sense of the moment and who had engaged his poem. Some of those, Jim Moreno, Joe Maloche, Danielle Lasso, a few other folks, Angelica Yanez, Nasha Khan, just to keep the conversation going.
Yeah, and what was your poem in I can't remember in the section. What was your did you write just a preface to
I just
it?
wrote the preface.
You wrote the preface, that's right. Yeah. And so, Katie, you had a question, I think, about the poet laureateship, is that right?
Yes, well, and can I answer your question that you
Sure.
asked me that I didn't answer yet?
Of course, yeah.
I want to give a quick shout out to Sarita Martin, who is the first poet I found out in the community who wasn't already part of my university community when I moved back to San Diego. And she was running a reading in Seaport Village called the New Alchemy Poetry Series. But she just welcomed me and was wonderful. And so I also hesitate to drop names because there are so many local poets I love, but Sarita has a special place in my heart, so I'm going to drop that name.
Awesome.
There you go.
So you started almost to answer the question. I'm just going to push you a little further.
Yeah, please.
You know, you said you would be around for the next poet laureate to perhaps advise or however they need you. Is there some advice that you're already thinking of that you would offer to future poets laureate? And are there things going on that you're going, oh, I really hope they continue this, or I really would love to see them do these other things?
Yeah, I guess, you know, and maybe this will go, I'll have this in as sort of my reflection in my exit interview. Or I'll write some sort of op-ed as like a 2-year reflection on being the poet laureate. But I think one of the things that I maybe naively did going into the position was I think I tried to build or envisioned what an organization might do or what we might do through a university with a one-person staff, which is me. And that has been incredibly hard, right? As you know, I've reached out to you. I'm like, let's hire some students to be interns. And so I think, having a very clear project and sort of building around that early, right, would be just really important. Because I think there's other factors, just like with any other institution in terms of bureaucracies and processes, logistics, some things move a little slow. And so knowing what to do when things are moving a little slow, because we have to get permissions and sort of all these things, is also important, because that's a part of the community building, right? I think for me, I was always going to use this as an opportunity for me to meet folks and to build with folks, and whether it's stuck within the parameters of the 2-year appointment, it didn't matter to me, right? I was just going to sort of do that, right? But I think starting early, and I think that's what someone told me before too, just start feeling that out a little earlier. And so that's my one. I have a lot of advice for the position, but I do think it's a really great opportunity to explore and at least do a few dream projects.
I love the way that you have brought people in and kept it so that you're not just a staff of one, but that you're involving a lot of people. I think that way that you pivoted that was really nice. And I also love the way that your advice could apply to all sorts of projects and the ways that we potentially overextend ourselves. So I'm soaking that in. Thank you.
It's like one of those things where like the poet laureate position is a sort of individualized sort of recognition and honor, but at the same time, for those of us who have come up in or we've developed our careers or developed our practice in the context of community, and in the context of collaboration and in the context of the collective, like that's a constant tension to try to break away from that sort of individualism and to really either highlight, that's sort of where I'm at now, is let's just highlight other folks, but also how can we empower each other to be like, here are some resources, let's pursue a project together.
So is this how you got it? You brought all this up in your interview? As far as advice goes for the folks who are applying now and will be interviewing soon, what would you recommend to them to come in talking about community, to really sell themselves?
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's going to be different. That's why we have a panel, right? I think every poet laureateship across the country is different, right? I think that, and their processes are different. What they're looking for is different. What they expect is different. The amount of resources that they have is different. So at least for us, I'm on the committee, so I can't. I guess I could say stuff, but I mean, it's gonna. I'm only one of the larger committee, right? And so the larger committee might see it as like let's award someone with a lot of esteem in sort of a literary track record, or let's someone who's community engaged, or And so I think it's gonna be maybe a bit of debate internally in sort of how to best serve, or how we might hope, the person who might best serve the community, right? And so, but I think it does not hurt, right, to have a background or a vision for bringing folks together, right, for making more space for poetry, right? That's ultimately what the position is about.
Exactly.
Can I jump in here?
Sure, yeah.
You applied and received a larger grant because of your project that you proposed. So just speaking about poet laureateships across the country,
That's
you were
true.
honored as a poet laureate.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'm really grateful to the Academy of American Poets. I think this is the second round of what they call the Poet Laureate Fellowship. I think 23 of us last year were awarded all across the country to pursue our big projects, whatever they were. I know people who were trying to do like a community film, other people did reading series, other people did a festival, other people did all different kinds of projects. And so I think that is a resource for, again, that calls for collaboration.
Right, yeah, collaboration, you heard it here. Ron Salisbury said he got it because he was wearing red shoes. Did you when you walked out of the room, or when you walked out of the Zoom, when you hit the end meeting button, did you feel like you had it?
No, I ran out of time.
You were still talking?
No, I just didn't feel like I said everything, but that's with everything, right? That'll be
Right.
happen after this interview, right? But I felt like I expressed my enthusiasm and vision pretty effectively, and then everything else was just like I was really excited just to say, oh, when we can do this, and we these people, this organization, this neighborhood, right? And so when I walked away, I was confident, but then I also, wasn't tied to necessarily tied to the outcome, because I think I would be out here trying to build these relationships. Maybe it would happen at a different pace, but thankful that I had continue to have the time to continue to build and meet folks.
Yeah, so your 10 years, I'm still beginning to write more now. You have a plan, you got something going on, you're gonna write a memoir about the whole experience. What's next?
I'm interested. I'm coming back to a book of experimental essays, which I think are really long prose poems, probably, about my mother. So I'm working on that. I have a publisher for that, and hopefully that comes out in 2026. So I'll be working on that, but also exploring the form of the essay, in particular the lyric essay. And so I might use sort of my opportunity to reflect on the poetry community and my time as poet laureate to explore that form and sort of do both of those. You know what I mean? So maybe you'll see a series of op-eds from me come out.
I love it. Yeah,
Different spaces.
You really did follow in the footsteps of June Jordan, essayist, journalist, right? You can do some op-eds. Would you take us out? First of all, thank you both for being here, and I just admire you both. And the work that you've done as Poet Laureate is absolutely fantastic, and the work you're doing here at Point Loma Nazarene University, kudos. Would you take us out with a poem?
Yeah,
All right.
yeah. I'm gonna read a really short one instead. From my book-length poem, I ask about what falls away, and I'll read a really short poem from it. The title of the poem is, it's an excerpt from the longer poem, I Ask About What Falls Away, which just came out this year. I draft this, dear Kasama, against fishhooks of hope. I draft against slow elimination. I draft from soft interior of riot. I draft syllables of known sadness, such knowing, such evidence, such kitchen table phenomenology of you reading this, of this reading you. On a rainy morning, I see you through the window in a blue mask and black hoodie, delivering bags of groceries at the doorstep. I draft from collected stillness, restless ghosts archived in my veins. Consider this an intimate poetics of rage. Consider this rage divine refusal. Let us talk about such refusal. Let us talk about such dysregulation of promise. Let us talk about how much I miss you.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you for having me.
Looking forward to your section in the Poetry Annual and all the work that's coming. I mean, we're buds, and looking forward to collaborating in the future. Thank you so again to Point TV and Point Loma Nazarene University. Please go to the city website and to our YouTube page. Like, subscribe, every little bit helps. And looking forward to seeing you at the next Conversations with Poets.